fairies began a long time ago. And it began with me having experiences as a child with beings that later on my grandmother helped me identify as fairies. My grandmother herself was a fairy seer, a medicine woman. And as a child, there was nothing more that I wished for than being like herself and doing what she did to actually deeper connect and better understand what seemed to be fairy beings around me. So that is how it kind of began. And then growing up in Romania, I also had exposure to an environment that is saturated with lore and fairy-related traditions, which prompted my future interest in the years to come to study and deepen and get an even broader perspective on fairies in general outside the culture. This is a very good and very interesting question. Depending on whom you talk to, the answer will vary by a large extent. I can say that paganism and pagan traditions do permeate Romanian spiritual life and social life. These are traditions that have been incorporated, weaved into Christianity, which is the dominant belief in Romania. So much so that there is no telling where do they begin and where do they end. In what relates to fairy traditions, the pagan aspects are very strongly present, although nobody stands there to ask, oh, this comes from a past that precedes Christianity by a very, very long time. There are, for example, in the case of what we know to be more benevolent kind of fairies, the Sânziene, who are around mostly around midsummer, and they're known to fly around those nights and bless herbs for people to then use for magic and for folk healing practices. And those are propitiated around summertime with offerings. There are bonfires that are lit both in acknowledgement for the event midsummer, as well as in honor to them, the Sânziene, and their fairy queen, Sânziana, which is known as, in Romanian lore, as Queen of all fairies. So aside from these, there are the religious aspects, because midsummer and St. John's Day, there are basically coincide around that date. So people also would attend Mass in church and participate in the Sânziene celebration customs. So there is not a really clear cut where paganism stops and the other stuff begins. They coexist. And as I said, this pagan old practices, they are impregnated throughout every aspect of everyday life. My writing regime is one-word definition: chaotic, which means that I write whenever I have the idea, whenever I have something that I feel that it really needs to be expressed. So I end up writing on bits and pieces of paper. I end up writing on my phone. I end up writing on the laptop whenever the laptop is at hand, and I do a lot of writing in my head. As far as the consistent element in my writing practice, I do wake up in the morning. around 5:30 a.m. And that is the moment when I managed to organize everything that I put on bits and of paper, on my phone, on the laptop. They aggregate and they become part of the next project or the current project that I'm working with. So this is kind of my writing regime. I define myself as pagan, polytheist, and everything I do revolves around fairy magic. So fairy witchcraft, I would refer to my practice as related to fairy witchcraft, if I were to choose a witchcraft tradition to really affiliate myself to. The first name that comes to my mind is that of Morgan Daimler, and I admire their work because everything they write is very, very thoroughly researched. I admire their approach that is both suited for modern practitioners, but it is rooted in authentic lore. And this applies to both the way they write scholarly research as well as fantasy. Their writing fantasy is outstanding through the fact that the characters, the fairy characters, the elves characters, are still recognizable in the framework of authentic traditional lore. So they're not completely divorced from that. It's a very beautiful development in bringing ancient or older motifs into contemporary writing and contemporary action. So yes, I admire their style and their work very much. The coolest thing about being a writer is, for me personally, when I write, I can only be myself. And in a world where there is so much pressure to conform and to comply, and very much conditional acceptance, having a place where I can really be myself and express myself, and somehow know that in putting out those thoughts, those feelings, there will be others that I cannot reach in person, but they will connect through that writing that I offer. So this is really cool. It's both empowering and it has this kind of soothing effect. There is a list of projects that I'm working on. I'm working on 2 books. One of them is Fairy Herbs for Fairy Magic. And I intended as an overview, or better said, a little bit of a compendium, where fairy herbs from different traditions would be looked at based on the way they relate to fairies, propitiating or protecting against, how they were actually given to various medicine men and women by the fairies themselves. So that's one project. The other one is fairy crafting by starlight. And this draws a little bit more on my personal experience, as well as the Norse and Irish fairy traditions that feed so much factor so heavily into my own experience and into my own spiritual practice. Then there is the Mystic South Conference, where I am planning to present a paper, and that would be apotropic elements in home design and home decor in Western European traditions. And there's going to be a workshop also that I will offer at the conference. It is about yoga practices for modern pagans and why that would be relevant. So that's like broad strokes of the workshop. And then there is my blog, Whispers in the Twilight, that I'm tending to and write regularly for it. And I'm planning to have at least one post a month. So these are like the main things that I have on my to-do list for the next year. Assuming that my 15-year-old self would be likely to listen to any kind of advice, I would like to tell her seriously to look into herself and stop trying to be someone else for the sake of pleasing someone else. I would tell her, embrace your magic. Don't run away from it because it is within you. It is part of you. And trying to run away only makes you run circles. That's what I would tell my 15 years old self. I'm saying it to myself today occasionally. I will invite the Dagda, the Irish god who is also known as King of all Fairies. He is a part of my personal practice. So, of course, that I cannot dine without inviting him. I would invite Freyr, the Norse god, who's also very strongly connected to the Alfar. And I would invite goddess Idun. That's not so much known about her. I mean, there's not so much written material about her, but she also features prominently in connection with Alfar and with Norse magic traditions. So they will be the three of my guests. The reason why I would bring them with me at the table would be to express gratitude and appreciation for all the learning that has occurred while studying their lore, while connecting with them magically, spiritual, intellectually. So they have been foundational in my development as a pagan, as a fairy seer, a fairy witch, and as a writer. So that would be my guess. Do not be afraid of criticism and make friends with the question, why? Whenever receiving criticism that may sound harsh, and maybe you as a writer believe it's not objective. So and ask the question, why? You are saying, making this as an example, you're saying that my character is not well developed. Why? What exactly in the development of my character doesn't look strong enough or good enough or pertinent? And asking the question why, we get a whole lot of feedback that we can incorporate as writers to make our work better. And the more we become capable to address very exigent audiences, the better our writing becomes. And there is a fine line in between writing to please others at all costs and still remain authentic and retain your voice and put on paper things that are really at your heart. So in asking the question why, this also gets you more information, more feedback from the other side, but also holds up a mirror onto you as a writer, making you reflect to why are you writing what you're writing and why are you writing the way you do. So that would be my tip for aspiring writers, and I hope it helps.